failures after failures. Um, the the way how it's been handled was really appalling. The outcome of the verdict was really upsetting. Not upsetting just for our family. I'm sure it's upsetting for everybody in a country, because domestic abuse is nearly it could come to you, to anybody in their home, to anybody, and it should be, everyone should be protected. And clearly from this case, that wasn't done.
Go to your mum's, lock the door, and we will see you tomorrow. That's what a police call handler told Raneem Uda, and it was there where she was murdered along with her mother by her estranged husband. Raneem was on the phone again to 999 when she was stabbed to death. 4 years after their murder, an Inquest found that failures by West Midlands Police contributed to their deaths. We're joined now in the studio by Julie Bindel, journalist and women's rights campaigner, and Nour Norris, who is Kaola Salim's sister and Raneem Uda's aunt. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Nour, just tell us how you felt when this inquest verdict comes in that says the police could have done more to save members of your family.
It was like reliving the whole trauma all over again with a new perpetrator.
Why do you say that?
Because the expectation of the police is usually to safeguard victims, and in Raneem and my sister's case, they did not do that. Until the last breath, Raneem was actually calling for help and begging for help for months before it happened, and on the day of the murder, she was even on the phone. Making sure that she's asking, her last word was, is he going to be arrested by the morning? So it's just, I can't help but think failures after failures. The way how it's been handled was really appalling. The outcome of the verdict was really upsetting. Not upsetting just for our family. I'm sure it's upsetting for everybody in a country, because domestic abuse is nearly it could come to you, to anybody in their home, to anybody, and it should be, everyone should be protected. And clearly from this case, that wasn't done.
And they knew he was dangerous. They knew that this man was dangerous, and ultimately they didn't do enough to stop him.
Well, absolutely, because there was enough reports from her telling them and begging them for help. From April, the 2nd of April, she made a 999 call, and she was very clear. Her first call was the tip of the iceberg, you could say, because she explained herself very well. She reported how dangerous he is and how scared she is, how violent and abusive he's been, and what his plans are. She basically reported everything from the day one she decided to actually cooperate with the police.
And Julie, this is a verdict against, in many ways, West Midlands Police, but did you get a sense of why? What went wrong? Why did they not listen to this woman in such a desperate situation?
Well, first of all, excuse me, I'd just like to say that in over 4 decades of campaigning to end domestic violence and working directly with police to improve practice, this is the worst case I have ever seen. So it's a combination of, on the one hand, lack of resources, which is part of the story, but a small part of the story. And secondly, they appeared to not care less. They downgraded the seriousness of the attacks each time they visited. There was a time when they were called out by neighbours who chased the perpetrator away from the flat, away from Raneem, and then they turned up eventually and didn't even further question the neighbour. There were so many failures, and it just appeared that they thought, well, who cares, you know, this man isn't...
Why would they think that? They're presumably not in policing to not care about things.
They weren't trained. They weren't trained properly. There was barely any training. There were huge mistakes, such as the non-molestation order that Raneem had to actually get herself, a civil order that would, in theory, stop him from harassing Raneem, and there was a power of arrest attached to it. They didn't even know what the law was when it came to a non-molestation order. So they didn't exercise the power of arrest. And the Centre for Women's Justice that supported Nour and her family throughout the inquest have done research on this and found that non-molestation orders are rarely actioned in this way. So there were some police officers that I personally heard give evidence at the inquest who appeared to not care less. And I think this is something that's really hard for us to understand and to hear, because we want the police to give a damn when it comes to life being at risk. But I think things have got immeasurably worse in recent years, and training has gone downhill, and police are not motivated to look at where the danger is. And in fact, Raneem herself seemed to be blamed. They were victim blaming constantly by saying, well, she didn't want to press charges. Of course she didn't. She was scared for her life. She wanted them to stop the perpetrator.
Is this a problem is this a women, they don't know how to listen to women problem? This is a sort of, we've seen problems with the Met Police, we've seen problems with other, what do you think, Nour, that they don't know how to listen to women? The culture is very masculine, might be quite a macho culture within police. Do you get the sense of that therefore they don't fully understand the trauma?
Yes, I do think they don't understand it, and that's a duty upon them to actually do understand it, because domestic abuse is something that is part of the policing. So they will face other crimes, and domestic abuse is one of them. So it's a duty upon them actually to know what domestic abuse and what comes under domestic abuse. So training will involve from understanding domestic abuse, coercive controlling, and harassment, and what comes around that, and why victims sometimes behave in a certain manners because they are scared, and why they are actually appear to be something, and they're supposed to actually see the signs, and have nothing. It came in the court that they had no idea what domestic abuse, and they didn't know what the policy was, and the policy that will show you the law behind domestic abuse. So the law is there, but there isn't anyone was following it in our case, and the law would say actually if the victim actually doesn't want to press charge, the law says that you can override their will because they are under a domestic abuse.
Were they also concerned, Julie, do you think, tiptoeing around communities they perhaps didn't fully understand, and they say, well, we don't want to be accused of meddling in a culture we don't fully understand? Was that part of this, do you think?
Well, I would hazard a guess and say that it was probably a little bit worse than that they may have just looked at the ethnicity of the perpetrator. He was from Afghanistan, and of the victims from Syria, and just thought, well, maybe that's what happens in their cultures. Maybe there's a higher tolerance for this. I mean, pure, unadulterated racism often drives these attitudes. And yes, the excuse could be, well, they're self-policing. And you could apply this to any particular community, whether it's Pakistani Muslims in Bradford, or from African communities where it's seen that the women can give as good as they get. I've heard all of this from police over the years, and although this wasn't dealt with at the inquest because it was outside of the remit of the coroner, we've had discussions with the legal team, with Nour, and it definitely that was involved, wasn't it, Nour?
Yeah, I mean, domestic abuse, if they get trained for the domestic abuse, under it will come all kind of sectors that they'll understand that what culture is, and what isn't, what a religion is, what it isn't. But because clearly, actually, domestic abuse in this country has been dismissed, full stop, for any person really around across the country. We have seen rise in domestic abuse, women more killed every day, and we need to do something about it. It's no good just sitting here trying to get justice. We want to actually make awareness of it, safeguard women who are under domestic abuse. Doesn't matter what their nationality is or their religion is. And it's just, the failure is so horrendous that you can't just put it under one sector. Oh, that was because it's a culture, or because it's, honor or whatever. No, you can't say that, because the outcome of this verdict was so overwhelming that it shows there is actually lack of understanding in the whole system, and the system themselves, they have it, is very, very poor and needs changing. The way they attributes towards domestic abuse needs to change dramatically. More awareness within the police and in a society about domestic abuse, and how we can actually handle domestic abuse.
Well, you're a very brave woman for carrying on that fight when such a tragedy has befallen your family. So thank you for taking the time to speak to us this
Thank
morning.
you.
That's Nour Norris with Julie Bindel. Thank you as well, Julie, for being in the studio this morning, talking about the very tragic events that lead to them still making this campaign to make sure that domestic abuse is handled properly by police.